It was almost 2 years ago now that this book was put on my radar by a good friend, Daniel Raphael. And I'd never heard of it before, but it really struck me because I'd been studying the Essenes for a bit and thought, wow, how did I not hear about this text? And I started reading it and was immediately awestruck by some of the things we've discussed so far. Number one being just the amazing way it articulates natural theology and natural law from a very kind of ancient Semitic perspective. And it just started to connect so many dots for me between the physical and metaphysical, as I said, in terms of things like what spiritual correlates have the ability to cause physical disease in the human body. Things like guilt and fear and addiction, like these actually become energetic distortions in our energy field that demons and negative entities can leech onto and feed off of. And the Essene Gospel goes into great detail on demonology and other subjects like that. But I'd been reading this text for, I don't know, like a week or so. And this is my own personal story on the way my diet and eating style has evolved over the last few years. This is by no means me trying to push any diet type on you guys or the listeners of this show, but I have to be honest about my personal experience. And I think too, guys, like if we all say, and everybody says, right, carnivore, keto, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, everybody says, oh yeah, I'm not, defensive about my diet. Like I just want to eat what's the healthiest possible diet. And we would all say that, right? We're all just coming to the table honestly to discuss these very important topics about what kind of food we put in our body and what effects that has on us physically, mentally, and spiritually. And so for me personally, I tried vegetarianism back in like 2018 for about a year and a half. And I definitely wasn't doing it right when I look back now. I was just kind of eating rice and vegetables with Indian sauce over the top every day. I was a total bachelor and not eating smart. So I didn't have great effects from the diet and decided I need to go back on eating meat again. My nutritionist said, hey, your thyroid, your hormones are super low. It's because you have no saturated fat in your diet. So you'd really benefit from eating some meat again. So I went back on meat, even though I was feeling pretty convicted that, I'll just be frank, like what could possibly be more spiritually obvious than the fact that contributing to the murder of an innocent sentient being whom God created and doesn't want to die is the most obviously negative thing one can do. But I think myself and most other people have ways of rationalizing this in a spiritual way. Well, I do it in a sacred way. I pray for the animal or whatever. And I was doing that. And nevertheless, those were just sort of the things that I told myself and other people to feel better about something I was doing that deep down my conscience felt not right about. I don't think it's God's highest way that I have to participate in animal genocide and murder just so I can feed my body. But what I said to God in my prayers was, God, I tried it, man. I went vegetarian and it didn't work. It crushed my thyroid, crushed my hormones, blood levels, wasn't good. So it seems to me like you made this whole human body thing to really need meat. So I'm going to eat meat. But if I'm wrong, please tell me, please show me. Like deep down, I feel a discongruency here and I don't want to do this, but I feel like I kind of have to do it for my health. And I went along with that prayer, you guys, for many, many years. So, 2018 to early 2024 or 23, 5 or so years of almost, weekly wrestling with this issue and praying to God, like, please, God, show me, why do I feel so wrong about eating meat? And it wasn't until one night I had, for some reason, insomnia, which doesn't happen a whole lot. But that night I was just awake, staring at the ceiling, couldn't go to sleep. And I had this urge continually in my mind of, hey, you should go upstairs and continue reading the Essene Gospel of Peace until you get tired and fall back asleep. I go upstairs at like 2:30 a.m. and I pick up where I left off. And it just so happened to be at the part of the book where Jesus lays out what I've come to call the Jesus diet. And it's a chapter in the first section of the Gospel of Peace where Jesus is asked by people, hey, how should we eat, Lord? What's the best dietary style? And Jesus gives this breakdown of the way we should eat. And he talks about intermittent fasting, not eating a lot of calories, like keeping the calories relatively low, not gorging yourself like a glutton, eating the herbs of the field, the fruits of the trees, the honey of the bees. He even talks about raw milk being a great food for man. And then he goes into the spiritual detriments of flesh consumption and talks about how a creature who's been murdered or killed, even in the last moments of its life, every sentient creature who doesn't want to die and is forced to die by someone else will have a moment of utter terror and resistance, right? Even a fish, in a sense, will have that moment. And it's the final throes of death that send the mind into a kind of psychological panic. You can't die, an animal cannot die a peaceful death when it's being murdered against its will. And so Jesus talks about the metaphysical consequences of that, of, hey, if you eat the flesh of a slain animal, you are eating death energy, and death can only produce death, whereas life can only produce life. And Jesus says things like, that which God has made alive, let no man kill. And these things, these phrases from Jesus quoted in this text hit me like a Mack truck, man. It just pierced my heart. And I went, oh my gosh, of course I should not participate in killing something that God has made alive. Who am I to say that this sentient creature should die so that I can have a steak tonight? And it was just one of those moments that every vegetarian or vegan, non-flesh eating person really has, where the switch makes itself. I mean, James, you were coming over to my house twice a week, cooking ribeyes with me for about a year before this happened. And it shook me to my core. And I just went, wow, I will never touch dead flesh for the rest of my life. And I was so happy to finally have the answer. And I told you the next day, James, about what had happened. And you were like, makes sense to me. I'm on board. And I think you started reading it and had all the same convictions. So it's kind of hard to put personal stories in the right context that will translate just how impactful it really was. But I mean, I can't express to you guys, top 3 easily most influential, powerful days of my life was that night reading that section of this text. And so we're going to get into first the story of how this text was found. And then we're going to show you that this text, whether or not it is a legitimate ancient text, has unbelievable parallels to Jewish Christianity, Nazarenism, which is what we teach here. And really is, I think, one of the best texts. Like if you just want one book you could give someone to say, hey, did you know there was an original form of Jewish Christianity before the Roman Empire hijacked it and made it about Paul's teachings? Yeah, well, if you read this text, you'll know exactly what that form of Christianity was like. I would give people this text. Even though I can't say this is for sure a historical document, I can say that the philosophy and theology in this book is identical with Jewish Christianity, which is why it's a really great source text for us. So I'll let you guys jump in if you have any personal stories you want to add to that before we get into the presentation. But I would love to hear, especially from you, James, like what that same section of the Essene Gospel talking about the consequences of flesh consumption, how that changed you as a meat eater and the way you looked at this whole topic.
Yeah, it opened up Pandora's box for me. And unlike Aaron, I wasn't very sympathetic to the vegan and vegetarian movements. I actually kind of thought they were super annoying and a little bit insane. But really, upon reflection, that was just my own ignorance and I was really burying the obvious fact that killing innocent animals is not a nice thing to do. I was burying it deep within me and then lashing out at people who were reflecting that back at me just by the way they lived. So what really opened my eyes was the spiritual element of killing innocent animals that want to live. You know, obviously it's not a nice thing to do from their perspective, but reading the Essene Gospel of Peace opened my eyes that there are spiritual forces that use the opportunity of death, bloodshed, violence, destruction. They use that as an opportunity to interface with humanity. So it actually, like any kind of sin, whether it's gluttony or lust, I believe that all of these sins, tear little holes in your biofield or your aura, whatever, however you want to explain it, but it gives them an opportunity to latch onto you. And it's very interesting in Hindu theology. I forget which book it is, but they talk about how demons love hanging out at slaughterhouses. And when I contemplate that, if I was a demon who loved bloodshed and the suffering of the innocent, what possible better place to hang out? How could there possibly, besides a battlefield, where else is there more bloodshed of the innocent? So it was completely eye opening, and I went from a long time animal based proponent to very quickly knowing in my heart that I would never eat meat again.
Yeah. Rakshasas is the Sanskrit word for flesh-eating demons.
Mm.
And it's the same exact philosophy that the Nazarene Essenes had. If you read like the Clementine homilies section on demonology, if you read the Essene Gospel section on demonology, you get this consistent, crystal clear message that negative entities, number one, love flesh consumption. They love the obviously killing of innocent creatures. That's the number one like pipe dream for a negative entity is death and murder. But if they can't get that, they'll latch on to people that are eating death and murder every day, and eating blood every day. And this is how what the Essenes said, that demons can attach to the death energy in your gut, in your stomach, and in your body that becomes part of your cellular makeup as your biology. And demons can attach to that energy and feed off of it. And so the reason we're stressing this is because anti-animal sacrifice, anti-flesh consumption was a staple of all Jewish Essene-type Christian groups, which Jesus emerged from. And it says so much about how the Essenes saw health and life and spirituality, because we know that these Essenes were living to be an average age of 120 years old in the first century. And that's per Josephus and Philo, two of our most reliable historians, both said this, that the average age an Essene lived to was 120 years old. And there was many Essenes living to be almost 200 years old, commonly. And you compare that to the average age lifespan of a typical Jew in Judea, and it's like 60 to 80 years, about what it is today. So these people were outliving the average lifespan of their day by double. And I think if you want any more proof that these people have unlocked some codes, I think that would be the proof you need, right?